What would you say to someone who told you that U.S. drug laws are applied differently to minorities? What would you say to someone who says there's a culture of racism within the police force across America? Well, today we're going to introduce you to someone who says both of these are true. And in his situation, he proved it and was able to get court-supported evidence that proved him right. Grab your pen and paper. You may want to take a note. And welcome to the Clarion Call Show. I'm Janice Liggins, your host. Joining us today is Matthew Fogg, retired Chief Deputy with the United States Marshal Service. Mr. Fogg served the Marshal Service from 1976 to 2008, when he retired after winning a landmark court ruling. We'll discuss that ruling and much more of his eyewitness experiences. Join me, won't you, in welcoming Mr. Matthew Fogg. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show. Glad to have you with us. You've got quite an interesting story, and I am very happy to be able to help share it with our viewers. So let's start off. You were a U.S. Marshal, a United States Marshal. What made you interested in becoming a Marshal?
Well, I have a degree in criminal justice administration from Marshall University, which has nothing to do with U.S. Marshals.
Oh, really? Okay.
But and I think that's what probably, and then maybe an incident that I had when I was young, I believe, it probably should have maybe ran me away from law enforcement, but it made me go in that direction. I was locked up when I was when I was about just turned 18 years old. I had witnessed a crime of myself and another guy at a store, and when the detectives got the information downtown, they got our names twisted up as the suspects and came and locked us up. And they got us on a Saturday morning, and it took about 2 days before they realized the mistake they had made. And that was a traumatic experience for me. But I remember I was so upset with the officer because I tried to explain to him that we were the witnesses, but it was almost like Black Lives Don't Matter at that time. You know, it was just, we got a couple of young black kids, you know, for robbery, and that's it. So I think, but after that incident, after they found out they made the mistake, and then it ended up ultimately coming back again. But that's what I think pushed me in that direction.
You were also a DEA agent.
That's correct.
Now, how did that happen?
Well,
you were both?
Yes, I was assigned to a DEA task force, so I had to be cross-designated as a drug enforcement agent. So I mean, I had to go through the training and everything, learn their rules and their procedures. I was a group supervisor. So I was a U.S. Marshal supervisor as well as a group supervisor for DEA, and I was running the fugitive unit.
Wow.
So we were doing drug and gun interdiction and fugitives. So that's why.
And this is across America, across the United States?
Yes. Well, it was the area, the task force was in the Washington metropolitan area, but our operations, without dragging operations, would be different cities around the country: Miami, Chicago, New York, L.A., Seattle. So joint operations.
You also had quite a few awards and recognitions as a result of your actions and fulfilling your duties.
That's right.
Some of those awards, for example, 300 of America's Most Wanted.
That's
Tell
correct.
us about that.
Well, what happened was during the task force operations, we would have to look for, these were major violators: rape, robbery, conspiracy, drug, narcotic conspiracies. So just all types of major crimes as well as even small level crimes. And so we just went after just about everybody. When there was a warrant out, we had a warrant outstanding, we'd go after them. So a lot of these people were heavy hitters. So those were what we called America's Most Wanted. And then some of them were actually featured on our most wanted, like the FBI has its 10 most wanted, US Marshal has its 15 most wanted.
Okay.
So I got a few of those as well. But bottom line is that's where we get the 300 America's Most Wanted. It was more, way more fugitives than that, but those were 300 of our major arrests. And then the awards came as the performance that I put forth. I got the directors of the US Marshal Service, one of the highest awards from the director of the Marshal Service, United States Attorney's Award for the District of Columbia, and the Federal Bar Association Award.
Nice. So you're doing great work.
Yes.
Great work. And in the process of you doing what you do as a marshal, as a U.S. Marshal, you begin to see and become exposed to some things that you didn't quite agree with. Tell us about that.
Well, you're talking about the discrimination and running into that whole realm.
Right.
What I began to see was just whole bias operations, and then the discrimination not only amongst the rank and file, but some of the operations that we were doing in our drug and gun interdictions, and the areas that we would go into. Mainly, we'd go to the urban areas, set up these task forces, and I would see how these task forces would be set up in cities like Chicago, New York, Miami, Washington, D.C., Baltimore. And most of the heaviest areas that we would concentrate our resources on were urban areas. So one day I raised the issue, why are we just targeting urban areas? Because we knew that the more affluent areas had the most drugs, the best stuff, and the purest stuff. And one of my special agents in charge, he told me, he said, Fogg, you know, it's true, they do have the best stuff in those areas. He said, but he said, just think about it. We go out there and start kicking their doors in, locking their children up, running through their neighborhoods the same way we do in the urban neighborhoods. So they're not gonna put up with it. They know judges, they know lawyers, they know politicians. They're gonna shut the operation down. That's when I started really becoming concerned about this sort of biased selective enforcement. And then on top of that, blowing the whistle inside the Marshal Service, trying to move up, trying to get promotions and the best assignments and so forth. I began to see that there was discrimination in those areas, and we had a particular manager that was known to be a racist. White and black knew him to be one, and they would just say, hey, they would just tell me, any astute African Americans, guys that had a career, had something on the ball, he would try to put some type of charge on you, do something to you to mess up your career. So they just told me to avoid him, but you can't avoid a chief. And then one day he did, in fact, target me and attempted to charge me with something, and I had to file a racial discrimination lawsuit against him.
So that's really how it started, with him actually attacking you personally with your career.
That's correct.
And so from there, you began to wage a lawsuit?
That's right.
Did it start right there?
Well, it did in 1985. And the amazing thing was, I was a collateral duty EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity investigator and counselor. I had been sent to training. So it was like God was preparing me for something, because when I went through that training, I understood how to file an EEO complaint and all of the intricacies that a lot of people don't know. Even though you know you're being discriminated against, you don't know the policies and the procedures, you can mess up early on. I knew what to do, and when this guy attempted to do the things he did to me, like one of the things, for example, he falsified, said I messed up on a special assignment when I didn't. He said I took a government car home and that I didn't have authority, and I had authority to take the vehicle home. He did all these things to get me pulled off the assignment. The manager that he was talking to believed him because he was his second line manager. So, but when that manager found out that I didn't do these things, he was pretty upset about it, but he had already disciplined me to a degree by pulling me off a task force. Then I had filed a discrimination complaint. So understanding the discrimination complaint started in 1985, and it just started mushrooming. So normally when you file a complaint, there's retribution, because the people that he knows and other folks kind of standoffish. They begin to say, well, he's fighting the system. I don't want to be identified with him, or I may not get promoted.
So most of this was against you personally, but you also recognized that there were things that you thought were unjust
That's right.
across the country.
That's right.
Did you factor any of those into your case?
Oh, yeah, no question. And ultimately, I ended up filing a class action. But one of the things of my case was when all of the, and I'll just jump to the end, when the jury came out with the verdict, when the jury had heard everything, the jury actually checked off that the whole, not only did the racism affect my career, and said 13 out of 14 of the claims that I allege were in fact true. The jury came back and said that the whole United States Marshal Service, from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., from Houston, Texas to Maine, to be a racial, hostile environment for all of the African-American Deputy United States Marshals nationwide.
Wow.
Behind that, I later filed a class action lawsuit, which is now pending.
Oh, so you still have something currently pending?
That's correct,
Wow.
yes. I'm the class agent in a class action lawsuit against the U.S. Marshal Service.
My goodness.
Yes,
My goodness.
yes,
So now, I didn't realize you had something currently pending.
yes.
Wow, my goodness. And they actually stated, basically, like you said, from Texas to Maine?
Well, they said the United States. They
Right.
said all over the whole United States. I just put emphasis on it
Sure,
from Texas to Maine. I mean, but basically, yes. It's class action covering the whole all Deputy United States Marshals.
Wow. That's awesome. How
Yes.
many, now did you have representation or
Yes.
going through this
That's
process?
correct, yes. I had a law firm that represented me. At first, I was representing myself, and then
I thought I had read that somewhere.
yes, I was representing myself. And then at one point in time, when I got before a judge, the government had kind of irritated this judge quite a bit because he thought that the case was going to settle, and the government didn't want to settle. So the judge said, listen, I would like to appoint you an attorney from our pro bono panel. The law firm that took it over said, look, we're going to stay with you, because when they saw the case that I had, they decided to stay with me. So they went with me through the trial. The trial was in 1998. We got the victory, and then it was another 10 years before they actually paid me, appealing the case for 10 years.
Wow.
So from 98 to 2008, it was on appeal. In the meantime, I continued on being an advocate, fighting for the Marshal Service, fighting for African Americans. The New York Post did a front page story on me, which that's where I got the title, Bigots with Badges. They took the whole Sunday morning edition of the New York Post, took the U.S. Marshal's badge, and in the middle of it, they put Bigots with Badges.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it was phenomenal.
That's a powerful.
Oh, yeah.
That's a powerful title to have to have. That's.
And God said, that's the name of your book.
Oh, really?
Yes, to me. It's like, because you couldn't, I mean, I got this thing blown up, and I carry it to several places and I speak, and when you see it, it's surreal. I mean, because just to see it, that's, like you say, a pretty powerful title, but that's what it turned out to be, because when you look at the discrimination and the racism and the things that were happening, like, for example, the white partner of mine out of New York, a guy named Steven Zanwick, they gave him a black rubber rat because he was talking about how his black partner, they were calling him the N-word and saying all kinds of, why are you working with that guy? And putting him through all kinds of changes just for working with a black U.S. Marshal. And so he went and reported it, and then they turned on him. And they gave him a black rat to indicate that you are snitching, you're a rat, and then it was black on top of that. So he pulled that thing out in Congress. We testified for Congress. He pulled that at the Congressional Black Caucus hearing, and it's on my website. You just got to go to bwbadge.com and you'll see the picture.
BW Badge. Well,
bwbadge.com.
that's awesome. But you prevailed.
Yes, that's correct.
You prevailed, and now with the class action. But it's good that you're able to get the word out. So, and your book too. That would be amazing. Have you started on the book?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's so much. Matter of fact, I've got my publisher and people tell me, look, you got 2 or 3 books tied up in you, because all of the things that I was involved in. I mean, you're talking about, like I say, fugitive dragnets. I was with the Special Operations Group SWAT team, Rodney King riots. I went out there with a team of guys and backed up LAPD on that. The Atlanta Penitentiary takeover, we went down to that to assist Ruby Ridge, where my supervisor was killed on Ruby Ridge standoff in Idaho. Just a lot of United Nations dignitary protection. So just a lot of I was involved in a lot of stuff in the Marshal Service.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So there's much more to come. Please stay with us.
I'm only 17, but I know about investing. Believe in something, buy shares in it, watch it grow. So, what if you could invest in the future? The future of kids, like a stock. Not the kind of stock that's about making money, but a stock for social change. A whole new kind of investment called Better Futures. When you invest, it helps kids go to college. I could be one of the first college graduates from my family, the first philanthropist from my neighborhood. And if I'm the first, then maybe there's a second and a third. Believe in us, invest in us, watch us grow. My name is Sydney, and I'm your dividend.
Welcome back. We're continuing our discussion with the whistleblower, retired chief deputy with the US Marshal Service and former DEA agent, Mr. Matthew Fogg. Again, welcome back to the show. We wanted to start in this part of the show talking about you had some political aspirations after your tenure with the Marshal Service to go. I know that you ran for delegate.
That's correct.
Okay, as well as even for Senate.
That's right.
What did you want to accomplish with that? Why did you go in that direction?
Well, that was in Maryland, District 25.
Okay.
And the reason why I wanted to run in that, because I felt like the criminal justice system, this whole system, we have not addressed it. I feel like when we look at our prison institutions and we see the numbers of black and brown people that are put in prisons, and I had a chance to see it firsthand, some of the stuff that they were being put in prison for. I just felt like we needed somebody up there with a strong voice to put an end to this stuff and to help to stop it. So that was one of the reasons why, as well as the pipeline from school to prisons. When we're talking about our young kids, it just seemed like our system is designed, the education institution is designed to actually push them in that direction. You don't have the resources in these schools. These young people don't have the mentoring and the programs that they need to get them going in the right direction. So it's a whole slew of litany of things that causes the problems that we see today.
You had even coined the term educational incarceration.
That's right.
That's deep. Share with us what you mean by that.
Education over incarceration. And that's pretty much what I'm saying. Is when we look at our institutions, see the numbers of African Americans in prison today, and this extraordinary disproportionate numbers. When you look at the white race, affluent, you look at the communities and you see we make up only 12% of the population, but yet we dominate. Here even in Maryland, 75% of the prison population is black and brown people. That's way beyond when we talk about racial discrimination. It's way beyond that. I mean, when you look at how bad it is. So my thought was, okay, well, somebody needs to be a voice to say, how do we stop that? How do we change some of our policies and procedures that causes us, as I was saying earlier, about targeting black areas? If we had equal opportunity enforcement operations, we wouldn't be having a conversation today.
Okay.
I've always said that. But by it not being equal, it's like two water fountains, one for black and one for white. Only the difference is the black water fountain is all messed up, dirty. There's nothing, hardly no water coming out of it. So it's this type of thing. It's the disparate impact. And that's why. So education over incarceration is my motto. Treatment over incarceration. This whole war on drugs scenario is it's a farce. I'm with an organization called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. These are law enforcement officers, judges, lawyers from around the country, over 5,000, that believe that the war on drugs is failed policy, is not working, and it's one of the most racist things that has ever hit America since slavery.
Wow.
So, I mean, all of these, the empirical data backs all of this up. So.
That's deep. Now, I know that you've gone on a number of different speaking engagements
Yes.
to share your story. And so I want you to talk a little bit about those. I know you've been on CNN
Right.
with Don Lemon. Tell us about that experience.
Well, the CNN was on there to talk about, again, the racial disparities. I was that particular show, I was debating a former New York prosecutor. And again, the mindset, a white prosecutor, his mindset was, well, the urban areas have open markets or tend to be an easier target, easier location for where drugs are. And I said, no. I said, we knew where they were. I said, if we can track down bin Laden, we knew where the people in the white areas and affluent areas were. I said, it wasn't that we were going to the urban areas because it was easy targets. I said, we were going there because they drove us in that direction, saying, if you go out to the white areas, then we're going to shut your operation down. So it was a different scenario that led law enforcement to urban areas to track down and to go after African Americans, blacks, because we knew from the academy, and I mean, I knew all the way through that if I stopped the car, for example, with 4 blacks in the car, and I stopped the car with 4 whites in the car, I knew whatever I said those black guys did, that whole institution behind me would back me up. That would include the judges, that include my bosses, the DEA, the US attorneys, all of those folks would back me up. Those white folks, you always got to be concerned if you cross your T's and dot your I's, because you don't know. Again, somebody might say, well, what was your probable cause for stopping them, Mr. Fogg? I said, well, y'all never asked me that before. So it was just a whole culture that was in place that said, if you lock up these black folks, that's easier to get your numbers up, it's easier targets than if you go start locking the white folks.
Now,
and that's just the reality.
When you say get your numbers up, was that just your individual numbers based on your performance, or was there a quota?
Well, yeah, it pretty much is. I mean, they don't come out and they don't necessarily say it's a quota, but that's what you were judged on. If you had so many arrests, then it looked like you were out there doing your job. You were doing things. Somebody didn't hardly had that many arrests. It didn't look like they were doing their job. So everything pushed you in that direction.
You also went before the Cato Institute.
Yes.
Now, that was a very interesting one. I got a chance to see a little bit of a video of you on that one. And there you were talking about the racist policies and the war on drugs.
That's
as
right.
one of the most racist policies in the country since slavery. That's a heavy, heavy indictment. I mean,
Yes.
that is really, but you were able to prove it all true.
Yes, and when you look at the empirical data and you see the numbers of African Americans today that are in prison around the country, when you look at the disparities, the numbers, I mean, like I said, 80%, when you talk about across the country, 80% of the drug arrests, people that are incarcerated, people of color. And this is crazy, and yet at the same time, whites use, the ACLU just came out a report, showed that whites use drugs at greater numbers than blacks. But yet, we are the ones who dominate the prison system. So it's pretty much, and then the recent statistics show that today, in America today, there are more African Americans, people of color, that are either on probation, parole, or either incarcerated than there were slaves at the time of the Civil War.
Right, right.
So you've got this whole, that's what it is, since slavery.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm sorry.
That I also know that you're mentioning the ACLU. They also report that the incarceration in even affluent communities
That's right.
is on the rise.
Right.
Affluent black communities.
Black communities, that's right.
Is on the rise. And
That's
that the war on drugs is really, especially the war on marijuana,
That's right.
was really used as a way to incarcerate black
That's
folk.
right. That's exactly
That's
right.
amazing.
And one of the things that is interesting, you said that because that came up during that CNN interview, that when he was trying to say, okay, the affluent, the less affluent areas had open air markets and all that. I said, well, then how do you explain that the ACLU report showed that even in the affluent black communities, the arrest rates were different than in the white affluent communities. So everything goes in that direction, but having personally been involved in it and seeing it for myself firsthand, that's when I started speaking out against it.
Well, for all the reasons you've shared with us, is really speaks to the mission of the Clarion Call, and that is we're prison prevention to try to keep them from getting entangled in the system from the beginning. It's the deck is pretty much stacked against
Yes.
the community, but for as much as we can, we need to try to keep our kids from even getting caught up in it from the beginning. But I
Right.
also wanted to mention, you said a couple other things when you were at the Cato Institute speaking, that law enforcement officers have a network behind them, basically to back up what they
Right.
said. And you said from judges to lawyers to share a little bit about that.
Right. That's called the good old boy network. And pretty much what happens is, as long as you're going along with the status quo, then that network is going to back you up. And again, the status quo, the network was designed to go after people of color. Again, like I said, when I started saying, okay, if I'm going to go out into the more affluent areas, now you're not going to have that support. But as long as we went into the black areas, locked up African Americans, people of color, Mexicans, whatever, it was fine. And you had, like I said, the judges going to support you, your supervisor going to support you, the DA is going to support you. Even when you would look at the amount of the sentencing guidelines, when you said crack versus powder cocaine, all of these things said that it just wasn't a myth, it's real, of how the institution was designed to do exactly what it did.
What do you say about to the regular citizens? Because you had also mentioned that officers can get around your First and Fourth Amendment rights if they choose to. So what would the average citizen need to do to try to protect themselves as much as possible when they're encountered?
Well, we always tell people, don't, if you get pulled over by the police or the police are trying to maybe make an arrest, whatever, you really shouldn't say anything. You really should wait and say, I need to speak to my attorney. Now, the problem is this. A lot of people are going to work or they got something they got to do, or especially people of color. They don't have the support mechanisms in their life as most affluent people do. So bottom line is, you get stopped, a young kid out there and he's driving down the road and the officer says, sir, can I search your car or whatever? Most of them know that if you say no, that officer may detain you or hold up and say they're going to wait for the dog. And then by the time you wait around for the dog and everything, you may be late for work. It's all of the things that come up. And then when the dog comes up, most likely a lot of times the dog is going to alert anyway. These are the little tricks and little things that police know to do. And so the bottom line is, you're still in the catch-all scenario. So a lot of guys just say, go ahead and search the car, just so they can just go on about their way. And then if they find something, or somebody was in your vehicle, left something in there, or you don't know.
Right.
So it's that process.
Well, you have had a tremendous career and set of experiences, and I think living it for the purpose of doing just what you're doing now. So what are you working on now, currently?
Well, right now, what I've done is we formed a coalition of law enforcement officers from LAPD, Chicago, New York, around the country. We're going to come to Washington, D.C., and we're going to have a press conference. We're going to meet with Congressman John Lewis, and we're going to have town hall meetings, and we're going to be exposing what needs to change in law enforcement. The reason why we got Eric Gardner, Trayvon Martin, and Michael Brown scenarios going all over America, because there needs to be some changes. So
Excellent.
we want to come and blow the whistle
Excellent.
on those things.
Excellent. Mr. Whistleblower.
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It took a lot of courage for Matthew Fogg to bring his facts to light. It wasn't easy, and many of his friends abandoned him. But in the end, the court could not deny his evidence. This gentleman won a landmark case against the United States Department of Justice. That took guts, ladies and gentlemen. Do you have guts? Do you have the courage? If you see something wrong that you think is wrong, report it, no matter who it is. If you see a citizen doing wrong, report it. Or an officer doing wrong, report it. Complaints are counted just as arrests are. If you want better, get the facts and use your voice. That's it for now. We hope you enjoyed the show. Join us next time, won't you, for the Clarion Call. Until then, I'm Janice Liggins. Blessings to you.